Like they call it the doghouse.
Okay, it's been about a week since Israel Adesanya took on Dricus du Plessis at UFC 305, which obviously saw du Plessis getting the win in the fourth round via rear naked choke. And going into the fight, I did think Adesanya would win the fight. I felt like du Plessis was a little bit too wild, a little bit too reckless, and Adesanya would be able to capitalize on some of the mistakes that du Plessis makes. But I discounted the fact that du Plessis has plot armor and seemingly, no matter how sloppy he fights, always gets the win. And you know what? Respect to the guy, because like I said, when he beat Strickland, I did say I was wrong about him. I didn't think maybe he was championship caliber, but he has shown that he is. He is tough as they come, an amazing fighter, very entertaining to watch, very well-rounded, a fantastic athlete, very explosive. And you know what? He is slowly turning into one of my favourite fights to watch, simply because he is just all kinds of reckless. And logic tells me that he should not be champion, but he is. And the fact that he's been able to defend his belt now, the fact that he's beaten Adesanya and Whittaker and finished them both is massive in my opinion, as well as beating Strickland. He is now, without a doubt, I feel like the UFC at the moment, there is this thing of guys being champions, but maybe not being the actual best in their weight class in the whole division. But to me, it's not that case now with du Plessis. Now he is the best. He's beaten Strickland, Adesanya, Whittaker, 3 former champions. So, amazing for him. But I want to focus on the last style bender, Israel Adesanya, because it seems that Adesanya's career hasn't really planned out the way I felt and a lot of people thought it would have. And so the last time, I think, well, not maybe the last time actually, I did a video on Adesanya when he beat Alex Pereira the second time. And in that video, I did say that he's one of the greats and that he deserves his respect for coming back and knocking out a guy who had beaten him, 3 times already. He was that at that moment. I feel like Israel Adesanya's star was at a massive point. But even now, obviously he lost to Strickland, lost to du Plessis, but it feels like even around that time, it still felt like Israel Adesanya hadn't really done what we thought he would do. Because if we go back to when he beat Calvin Gastelum, that was the point where I think people were like, okay, Adesanya definitely has something there, because he's shown he's tough, he's shown he's got that grit in him, has a 5-round war with Calvin, interim champion. Then when he beat Robert Whittaker, I think that was the point when everybody was like, okay, this could be our next big superstar. And I felt like even Israel Adesanya felt like he was on that trajectory. He then fought Joe Romero. Terrible fight, boring as hell. But you could look at the argument. Romero didn't really do much. Obviously, Adesanya could have done a lot more as well. But you forgive him for it. One bad fight. Anderson Silva had plenty of those. We then go into the Paulo Costa fight. Amazing performance by Adesanya. Lights Costa up. Stick and move. Costa couldn't get near him. He absolutely destroyed his leg. And in hindsight, maybe it doesn't look as great as a win. But at that time, Costa was the worthy challenger. He had beaten Romero. He had done so much. Was knocking everybody out with ease. And he was, at that point, the rightful challenger. So, you look at that and you think in that fight it was a huge fight and he lived up to all the hype and expectation and knocked him out and did it in such an impressive fashion that Romero couldn't even do that. So you look at that and you think, okay. He then goes up against Blachowicz, loses the fight against Blachowicz. It was somewhat close up until about 3 rounds onwards. Then at that point, Blachowicz just went ahead. I think Adesanya was just, I don't know, I don't want to say he was too small per se, but it just felt like he got outworked. And Blachowicz fought an excellent fight and really stuck to a game plan and was also able to implement the wrestling in the 4th and 5th round, which I think to a lot of people opened up some holes. And then from that point, I think that was the point where it started to go down a bit for Adesanya, because then he fought Vittori, but it was just a dull fight. There was no real entertainment going on in that fight. He then fought, I think it was Robert Whittaker after that. Again, nothing crazy entertaining in that fight. Then we have the Cannonier fight, which again wasn't entertaining. About 3 fights where I thought they were very dull performances. I know the Whittaker fight was somewhat competitive, but I still didn't really look at that fight as it being a super entertaining fight. And then I look at the Alex Pereira fight. Entertaining because of the threat that Pereira carries and because of the history. And Poatan, he's never ever gonna have a boring fight because the way he fights is to take your head off. And in the end, it was quite entertaining. And in that fight, Adesanya loses. He gets TKO'd in the 5th round. He'll say stopped early, but in my opinion, if he didn't step in there, Mark Goddard, I think Poatan would have knocked him out in that fight. Anyway, he was all over the place, and I do feel like Pereira is probably one of the best finishers in the sport. Potentially, Adesanya could have done what he did in the second fight, but I just don't feel. I think he was going. And then he fights him, obviously, in the rematch. He beats Pereira in the rematch with an amazing knockout and an iconic moment for him. Then gets embarrassed by Sean Strickland in a fight which I don't think you'd find many people who felt Strickland was going to win that fight. I felt most people felt it was pretty much a routine win for Adesanya, but once again, Strickland gets it done, beats him. He then fights du Plessis and loses the fight again. So Adesanya, in this point in his UFC career, has 4 losses to Blachowicz, to Pereira, to Strickland, and to du Plessis. And if we break down all those losses, so the Blachowicz fight, I felt like he got overwhelmed a little bit and was a bit fearful of the power. And the argument was, he went up in weight. It was he was daring to be great, and all this. I think Blachowicz was a lot more winnable than it probably felt, but I just think he was. Adesanya, the way he is, he's technical. He doesn't really like to take many risks, and I feel like against a guy like Blachowicz, it makes sense. But I do think that was a big factor in that. And then losing to Pereira, it was a close fight, but the problem with Pereira is you can never ever count him out, and I think the way Poatan fights, it's just hard for someone like Izzy to go out that fight unscathed. There's always going to be that threat there. The way he was able to catch him in the second fight was him playing possum after Pereira had already beaten his legs up again. So it was one of those. So I feel like that was more down to Poatan, I felt, than actually Izzy himself. But then the Strickland loss, stylistic nightmare for Izzy because of the way Strickland was able to sort of stay in his face, but without actually putting himself in danger because of the way Strickland has his stance. And the only way I think you were ever going to beat Strickland is if Izzy was lunging into shots and being a bit more explosive. And then the du Plessis fight, a very close fight, and Adesanya was doing great work with the body shots, but he made such a rookie mistake on the ground and allowed du Plessis to take his back in the 4th. And to me, that was just a big issue. And I think the Blachowicz fight and the du Plessis fight are similar. I felt as if the Strickland fight, it was kind of similar to the Pereira fight, but not really, in the sense that, Pereira was constantly stalking Izzy. It was Pereira's style and Strickland's style that, to me, were the reasons why those guys won the fight. But with Izzy, his reputation, we saw him as the next Anderson Silva, the next John Jones, somebody who was going to take over this sport. His guy was dancing in his walkout against Robert Whittaker. He's there coming out with the Undertaker's urn against Jared Cannonier. He's coming out knocking Pereira out, doing the little bow and arrow. He has some iconic moments, and Adesanya, he has there's a lot of things with him. Like, he has some cringy trash talk, don't get me wrong, but he does have some good lines. Like, I think he doesn't swing and hope, he aims and fires. Like, little lines like that. I just think, he did have that confidence where, yeah, it was arrogance, but it wasn't arrogance where you felt like he was going over the top. He was very much confidence in himself and his abilities, and because of how he used to fight and the way he used to mix up his strikes, he was really entertaining to watch. And look at the Derek Brunson fight, the way he caught him with the knee and then just got him. I remember he hit the straight right to a question mark kick. It was so beautifully done. He used to mix up his strikes so well. He hasn't done that recently. He's now kind of gone very safe, almost done what a GSP did, and GSP went safe when he got the belt and sort of just wrestled a lot. But Adesanya, he's almost gone. His route was just leg kicking at range and making sure he doesn't get hit. And to be honest, I think he's a great fighter, Izzy, and I do think he's one of the great middleweights. However, I think you're kidding yourself if you don't think that this guy, we felt like it has been a bit of a, I don't know, just a bit of a bloomer for him, really. He was somebody who we felt was going to be one of the greats, like I said, the Anderson Silva, John Jones type, and he really hasn't lived up to that. I think if you look at all these fighters from his sort of era, I think Kamaru Usman's the one fighter who can held his head up high and think, he had some iconic moments. His only loss, well, not only loss, but his losses, one was a complete lightning strike head kick with Leon Edwards, and then The second fight, he just confidence got taken away. But you could also argue he took the fight because it was a bit short notice, not short notice, but he'd got knocked out that not that long before. Chimaev fight, he took it. I'm gonna do a whole video on Usman because I actually do think he could still win the belt back. But you know, the Chimaev fight, he took on short notice. He got a lot of respect. Like his losses are a bit more commendable, and you kind of look at them and you think he had done so much beforehand. With Izzy, it's not the case really. Izzy, I felt like had beaten Costa, and from that point, it felt like we're witnessing one of the greats here, but he just hasn't been able to take it to that next level. Sometimes when you have big wins, it can kind of elevate you as a fighter. I felt like when Usman beat Covington, for example, he was able to take that win and just elevate his career. For Masvidal, yeah, I know the first fight was a bit dull with Masvidal, but then since then, he fought Gilbert Burns, he finished him. He fought Masvidal, he finished him. He finished the majority of guys he stepped in the octagon with when he was a champion. The only guy he never finished was Leon Edwards. Other than that, he was able to beat all of these guys comprehensively. Even Covington, he actually did it twice. He beat Covington by decision, then beat by stopping him. Beat Masvidal by decision, then knocked him out. Like I said, stopped Burns, which is no easy feat as we've seen. So Usman has that legacy. To me, Adesanya doesn't have that. It felt like we expected more out of Izzy. We felt like he was going to go on to another level. Was really going to elevate himself. But I think he hasn't really gone on to become the fighter that we felt he was going to be. And it's not to say that he's had a bad career. He's had a fantastic career. He's had a lot of title defenses. Went up in weight, challenged himself, had an amazing moment against Alex Pereira. Probably one of my favourite knockouts of all time. But ultimately, I don't think he's really gone on in the way we felt he would. He hasn't become that superstar, that almost Conor McGregor-esque type character. What he has become is somebody who was once looked at as that superstar. Now people, I don't want to say hate the guy, but now he's a villain now. Nobody likes him anymore. And I'll admit, some of the stuff he does is questionable. The pink hair, the stuff with the dog, whatever. And his trash talk as well. It's become a little bit like he's forcing it. It felt like he's almost trying to force it now. And that's what's happened for a while. It felt like, I think it was after the Romero fight. This is where I felt like it became a bit more of a thing with him. Before that, I don't think it was the case. I think he was doing a good job. I feel like the Whittaker fight, don't get it wrong, I do think he was trying to force a little bit of a rivalry between him and Whittaker. There was a rivalry there, no doubt, but I don't think it was as serious as he made out. He said that line about making his nose bleed, and he was in the nosebleeds, but it wasn't a great line. But it looked cool because he actually did make his nose bleed in the fight, so you can allow it. But his trash talk, it just doesn't have that same flair that I think it used to. I think he was just himself, Izzy, and because he was himself, it worked so well. Now it just feels like he's forcing it, and that's where it kind of come across as a little bit cringy, and that's why you get people who are consistently onto him. And I don't think there's this whole narrative that he wasn't never that good. It's completely untrue. He was an amazing fighter, but I do think two things have happened. I think he hasn't been able to really take that star to another level. McGregor was able to do that. I don't think he did. Izzy never had that, I don't know, that belief really in himself. I think to me, when we already established this guy was a champion and he was beating people, I feel like the next step should have been to try and finish guys or to make your fights entertaining, because that is how we build a star. That is what happened with Kamaru Usman. That is what happened with some of these other fights. You look at, look, McGregor's never been boring, but, look at how that guy fights. That's a big reason to why people tune in to watch him. He's entertaining to watch in and out of the octagon. Izzy was sort of entertaining outside of it, but wasn't really that entertaining at all inside of it. His walkouts are always amazing, but to me, if that's what you're going to do, you got to try and build that. I feel like when Chris Pratt got onto him about, not being, you walk in with The Undertaker and you act like you're that guy, but then you perform like that, it's something that damages your reputation. You're consistently having these boring fights, and because these boring fights are coming, and you mix that with the trash talk that doesn't really hit, people lose interest, and I think that's what's happened with Adesanya. I think people now have lost interest in him. They don't look at him in the way they used to. There are a lot of people who are fans of him, and I'm a fan of him, but ultimately he doesn't have that special thing that I think we thought he did. He almost has lost that spark a little bit, and against Duplessis, this is a guy, as much as I praise Duplessis, I feel like he should be, if you are that Anderson Silva, John Jones of your era, you should be beating guys like Duplessis. You should be beating guys like Strickland. But again, maybe he took his eye off the ball. I mean, he was incredibly active, which I give him respect for. But to me, Adesanya is just lost that superstardom that I think we felt he had. I think maybe he overplayed his hand. I don't know what it was with him. I just felt like if he had maybe tried to be a bit more entertaining in his fights and had actively tried to stop his opponents, I think that to me would have made the difference, because then people would have seen that, he's, like I said, entertaining inside and outside the octagon, and he can do it. Adesanya is more than capable of finishing a lot of the guys like a Vittori. I mean, Vittori's a hard one, in fairness. Nobody's ever stopped him. But stopping guys like a Vittori, Cannonier, we've seen him get knocked out. We've seen Whittaker. He knocked Whittaker out in the first fight. I know Whittaker fought differently in that rematch, but I think it's more than doable. But I just think he never was didn't want to take the risk. He wanted to be the smart fighter, and the problem is, if you're going to be that fighter, you're then banking on people coming at you and trying to force the fight, and that's where you can get the stoppages. It's the issue Shakur Stevenson's having. He's saying himself it's the opponents, not him. The problem with that, you've then got to hope and pray that you're going to get somebody who is going to bring it to you, because if you don't, you're just going to be labelled as a boring fighter time and time again. And once that label has stuck to you, it is very, very hard to get it off. Kamaru Usman was able to get rid of it because he just worked on his striking a lot. But ultimately, Izzy's a striker. Even if he submits guys, people will still call it boring. There's only thing he could do is just be more aggressive. And to me, I feel like his style, he can do it. I just don't think he wants. I just don't think it's in his nature to do that. He's a smart fighter, and I think that's just a big reason to why I felt like the superstardom of Israel Adesanya just didn't take off. He never became that guy we wanted him to be, and it's a shame. He is there's no doubt about it, but I just think that combined with him trying very hard, I think outside the octagon to be a little bit of a quirky character. Some of the stuff he says, I think when he beat Whittaker, I feel like that was the moment where he almost saw his name up in lights and he tried to be this crazy character who's saying all these crazy things like about the Twin Towers and saying just a lot of weird lines about Elsa and all this kind of stuff. And again, I don't judge people outside the octagon. I'm very much a fight fan. I don't care for that. But if we're talking about making a superstar in combat sports, they've got to be that guy inside and outside their respective field. And I just don't think Adesanya was that. He never lived up to it. And I think outside the octagon, he became, to a lot of people, a little bit unlikable. And I just think that, combined with the fact that he was having boring fights time and time again, just didn't help. But I hope Israel Adesanya, I hope he doesn't retire. I hope we do see him a few more times. And I hope he does get another run at the title. Maybe go up to like heavyweight, him and Poatan again, maybe. He is the one guy who has beaten him and was able to knock him out. So we'll see how that goes. But just my thoughts on Israel Adesanya. Like I said, it was a great performance from Duplessis. Good performance from Adesanya. But I just think now, what is his legacy now? Will he be remembered now as the guy who felt like he was good but ultimately believed in his hype too much, had cringy trash talk and just faded away? Or is he going to be remembered as the guy who, without everybody was doubting him, he lost to Duplessis, but he came back and was able to rally again, and he was able to get the belt back and show that he's a legend? We'll see what happens, but a great fight, Adesanya, but unfortunately, I just don't think his career has panned out the way we all thought it would. But yeah, just my thoughts on Israel Adesanya. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and yeah, until next time.